Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Grays in Barristers Committee webinar on paperless and remote working. This session is being recorded and will be available to view on YouTube for 2 weeks. Before we begin, the Inn has asked me to remind you that there is one last Grays webinar talk, which is next Thursday at this time. It's entitled, What Say Barristers About Black Lives Matters and What, If Anything, Can Grays Inn Do to Help? The moderators are going to be Anesta Weeks QC and the panelists Ijoma Mbala QC, Syed Hussein QC, Kim Hollis QC, Galaga King, Fitzreen Headley and Kwame Botang Sekeri. More details of that are on the Inn's website and the events section, and the booking is through GEOS as normal. So then on to tonight's proceedings. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Matthew Richardson of Coram Chambers and Darren Howe QC of One Garden Court. You simply could not be in better hands for this topic this evening. They are a tremendous source of knowledge on paperless working. And if you didn't see the brilliant series that they contributed to in Council magazine in the first few months of the lockdown, I would seriously suggest you try and get copies of it. They're going to be talking obviously about paperless working. These are core skills that essentially every barrister is going to have to learn in the next few years, if not the next few weeks. Darren and Matthew have very kindly said that they will take questions at the end of the presentation, but if you could write your question in the Q&A box at the bottom, you can do that at any time and I will collate them, and then we'll have the questions at the end. But without any further ado, let me turn over to Darren.
Good afternoon, good evening. I'm going to start with a quick review of where we've come, or how far we've come, since the 19th of March. You can see on the slide that on the 19th of March, the Lord Chief issued instructions to the judiciary that all hearings would have to have a participant, at least one, if not all, attending remotely. And you can see the Lord Chief anticipated that there'd be some bumps in the road as the court service, the judges and the lawyers got used to working in a new way. In the division in which I practice, the family division, the president set out on the same date that the default position for the time being would be entirely remote working, unless justice and fairness required a court-based hearing. And then 23rd March, again, the Lord Chief put a stop to jury trials, and jury trials were halted for quite a number of months. So we were all trying to keep calm and carry on, working from home, often with, for some, childcare responsibilities and the distractions from being at home when everyone in the family is also locked in with us. Some thought they worked very hard, perhaps others didn't. And indeed, adopting new ways of working came as a struggle to quite a lot of people who simply didn't have the skills to do what was then needed. So I have worked pretty much like this. I haven't been in court not once since the 19th of March, and so all my hearings have been remote. But it's fair to say that even the most annoying people at work, you do miss after not having been in a courtroom for over 4 months. So we all had to climb a very steep learning curve. We had to adapt to new ways of working, and at least for urgent applications, the courts were kept operating. But not all jurisdictions. So in the family jurisdiction, urgent applications, children needs protecting, all those applications would be heard in one form or another. Urgent criminal cases would be heard. But of course, different jurisdictions with different priorities and different levels of urgency had different approaches, and indeed different levels of seniority across the bar had different experiences. Some trials went ahead and some were readily adjourned out. But we have learned some, in some instances, painful lessons. And so what Matthew and I are doing this evening is really sharing those lessons with you so that you don't make the same mistakes or continue to make the same mistakes. What we are not doing is teaching you how to build and manage an e-bundle. There are now practice directions in relation to e-bundles and how they are to be presented across the jurisdictions of the courts. If you want to watch a 2.25 hour online training session, then the link is on this slide. It can be accessed from the FLBA website. What we are doing is really learning or sharing our learning and essential information, because you don't want it to be your fault if a remote hearing or hybrid hearing goes a bit wrong, as often they have. So my first heading is what devices are required for effective paperless working. And the most obvious lesson and the clearest is one device is not good enough, especially if your only device is an iPad. Simple reason for that is that most video conferencing platforms treat your iPad as if it's just a large mobile telephone. So you won't have access to screen sharing, presenter view functions on different platforms that I believe are essential to be an effective advocate. You need to show the witness a document. You want the judge's attention brought to a particular document. So you need to be able to share your screen, and screen sharing is just inadequate on an iPad. And the same applies on CVP, which we'll come on to. You need to have 2 devices, and one of those devices must be a laptop. That's my advice, so that you have all the functions available on your PDF management software. So you want to use your laptop to build your bundle and then have it scanned or OCR'd, so it's a completely searchable document. And you also need another device to access the video conferencing platform itself. Experience has shown us that it's best to access the hearing on one device and then use another device to manage your bundle. But you do need to have the bundle on both devices, and I will explain why shortly. Also, a very good idea to decide what device you're going to use for what task. And I'll just give you an example of how I work. So I have a new MacBook. I have an old MacBook that I replaced with the new one, and I have an iPad. So I use my older MacBook to access the video hearing on whatever platform it is on. But I also have the device loaded onto that laptop, because if I want to share a page from the court bundle with the judge, or ask the witness about a page, then I have to have it on that device so I can share that screen or share an app from that device on screen. You don't want to share the whole screen, because then if you've got other data on that document, on that device that's on the screen, you might share that by mistake. So you want to be sharing just an app from that device. My second iPad I use for preparing the case, making my notes during the hearing, preparing my cross-examination notes, have a copy of the bundle on there which I annotate for my trial preparation. And then I have an iPad, and that iPad I use as my notebook. So I type my cross-examination notes, I send them to my iPad, I then have my iPad and I update them with my iPad pencil. So I work with no paper at all, and I communicate with my client using my mobile. We set up a WhatsApp group. It'll be me, my junior, my solicitor, and the client, and I just press the video symbol on the WhatsApp group and have a video call with the team prior to the hearing, during breaks in the hearing, and after the hearing. All very simple. My view about remote working is that the real difficulty with it is from a client care perspective. If you and your clients are not together in the same room, you're not there to provide the reassurance and face-to-face guidance that clients often need. So you need to have another form of communication. It may well be you join a remote hearing by having your whole team in a conference room in chambers that's large enough for you to respect social distancing guidance. You might all be remote, but you'll have to think about breaking down those usual barriers between client and barrister. So as I've said, my client has my mobile phone number because that's necessary to set up the WhatsApp group. Some people are uncomfortable with that. I do direct access work, so I'm perfectly used to it. Others might need to consider getting a specific work SIM card, a different telephone, if you don't want your client to have your personal mobile phone number. But you have to think about these other methods of communication, because you won't be able to use the platform that the hearing is on for having conferences and so on. Device purchases, what we have to remember, particularly in times where finances have been stretched and challenged, is that they are investments in your practice. And remote working and hybrid hearings, there's no sign of it going away in the long term. I'm sure it will be scaled back, but it won't disappear. And so purchase of devices are investments in your practice. Obviously, the costs are offset against tax. Choose your devices wisely. You don't want to block yourself out of certain functions on certain platforms because of your choice of device. And also, increasingly, chambers now need to take a more cohesive view about IT matters rather than just leaving it to individual members really to do their own thing. My second topic I've called essential connectivity upgrades. The biggest problem that the courts have faced and practitioners have faced is unstable connections. So if you have a weak or intermittently weak internet access from home or maybe from your room in chambers, you can either not get on the platform in the first place or drop out at various points during the hearing. And again, you don't want it to be your fault that a hearing has to be adjourned because of the associated cost with that and the upset that is caused. So you need to do something about your internet signal. Do a speed check. Just type in broadband speed check in any browser and you can test the speed of your connection. And take with a massive pinch of salt the minimum download speed that any of the video platforms says is all that's needed. For example, CVP, the developers of that suggest just a 1 Mbps download and a half of one for an upload is adequate. Experience suggests otherwise. I think HMCTS are about to recommend minimum download speed of 4 to 8. But most home broadband speeds greatly exceed that. But we still have people dropping in and out. So you need to think about your connectivity and what else might be affecting it. So check the speed in the different rooms of your home. Really important, consider installing a Wi-Fi booster. I use an Ethernet connect cable. It's just a cable that connects my laptop directly to the back of the router. Recently at home, when I had one installed, my internet speed went up by 3 times. So from just over 20 to over 60. Makes a massive difference in your in the clarity of your presentation at a remote hearing. If you share your home with others, so if you're parents of children who like Xbox or Netflix or YouTube, you need to make sure that they are not streaming or downloading an awful lot of material when you're in a remote hearing. That will greatly impact on your ability to participate in the hearing. And turn off devices that are automatically connected to the internet you have in your home. Just go around. We could all have our old phones, iPads that aren't being used. If you know you've got a connector hearing, make sure they're turned off. And again, if you're in chambers, the connectivity in every room in chambers is not necessarily the same, particularly if the clerks are in and all working hard with other members of chambers also in their rooms, you might have difficulty. So it's something that really must be thought about and thought about in advance. Your remote hearing location, third topic. I think when we started doing remote hearings in late March, there was a real concern that people weren't dealing with them with the appropriate level of formality that is required for a court hearing in which we're deciding important issues for the litigants. So whilst we might be sitting at home, the environment and our behaviour must reflect that it's a formal court hearing. So again, you need to be appropriately dressed. A neutral backdrop needs to be behind you. I purchased a floor screen, so it's just a projector screen that sits on the floor. So when I sit down at my desk, I just pull it up behind me. It's self-standing, so it's a completely white background just behind my chair. It provides you with increased privacy. And importantly, but not always easy, be in a room where you won't be interrupted by others. The doorbell and Amazon deliveries, the telephone, noise from neighbours. In my case, seagulls are often interrupting my hearings because I live in Brighton. So again, it's just all these issues that need to be thought about. Fourth topic is what I've called hybrid hearing disasters. There's been a lot of trials with hybrid hearings without everyone thinking and preparing properly. I think the biggest disaster is feedback. Not all judges have the same level of IT equipment. Not all courtrooms have the same facilities. Some judges on old DOM1 HMCHS laptops will struggle on any platform. Even now Google Chrome is authorized and works on DOM1 laptops. Some still struggle. Very many hybrid hearings had to be abandoned because of the feedback I've mentioned. And so there's some very simple steps that you can take to ensure that that's not caused by you. So hybrid hearings can take place, particularly using CVP, which I'll come on to, using JVS. That's just the video link system that the court has that links with video suites in prisons and can link directly with CVP. But if you're not using JVS and everyone is on their own device in different locations, some in court and some not at court, and that's all the hybrid hearing means, everyone who is in court has to wear a headset. If there's more than one audio feed, then you're going to get feedback through the whole system, and anyone here joining remotely won't be able to hear the audio adequately. And that's not just the lawyers, the judges also will need to wear headsets, as will the witnesses. Otherwise, there'll just be feedback through the whole system. Only the witness giving evidence and the advocate asking questions should have their microphones activated. Again, the judge is going to have to mute their microphone. Otherwise, you have the same problem. You get reverb through the system and no one can hear the evidence. There will be a delay. So if you're sitting in court and the witness is in front of you giving evidence, but you've got your headset on, there'll be a slight delay between the audio, the speech in court, and what comes through your headset. So you might want to take your headset off, but have your microphone close so that you're still speaking into the remote system for those who aren't present, but you're not confused by the delay between the electronic and the live. Importantly, ensure there's enough time built into the court day to enable a practice for each witness before they're called. So when you're at a case management hearing, think about the witnesses that are coming, what time they're coming, and then they're going to need to be put into the witness box. They're going to need to be mic'd up with the headset. and have a little practice so that it's working for them and working for those appearing remotely and those in the court. If you're having a remote hearing that's not via JVS, there needs to be a laptop in the witness box. So the witnesses can see the advocates attending remotely, and they can see the witness. And importantly, all the advocates need to know how to use the screen sharing presenter view features of the hearing platform. So it's not necessary for physical bundles to be provided to the witness box. All advocates can simply put the page on the screen in front of the witness and ask them about it. It's much more simple and it saves a huge amount of time than, when ushers used to be having to change bundles for witnesses. Importantly, for a hybrid hearing, discuss and if possibly agree who needs to be there and who doesn't. Social distancing is going to be a feature of our lives in court for many months to come. Who needs to be there? Does there have to be an in-person cross-examination of any particular witness? The judge may want to see some witnesses live. Do all the advocates need to attend to cross-examine in person? On a case-by-case basis, this all needs to be discussed. I just want to talk very briefly about CVP. It's been rolled out across the Crown Courts for some time now. The rollout is partway through for the Civil and the Family Court. It is an off-the-shelf product purchased from a developer named Kinley that's been adapted to suit the needs of the court service. And so as the result of it being off the shelf, there are some restrictions as to how it works. And it is essential that the advice that I'm about to give you is followed to ensure that you have full access to CVP and its features. As I said before, you need to be able to show documents on a screen to complement your remote advocacy. And if you don't join CVP using the right device or the right browser, you will not be able to do that. So these are my top tips for CVP, also known as if you do anything different, you're asking for trouble. So firstly, download Google Chrome. If you don't have it already, it's free. It works on Windows devices and MacBooks. CVP was designed to work with Google Chrome. So you have to have Google Chrome. It does work with on other platforms, but it's just not as well with, and you don't have access to all of the features. So why limit yourself by not downloading something that's free? So do that. If you are going to accept the hearing link on an email, which is how it's going to come to you, and just want to click on the email, you have to then make Google Chrome your default web browser on your device. Very easy to do. Go into your preferences and do that. Otherwise, you have to cut and paste the link into the address bar of the web browser. And again, I join my hearings by adding the link into my calendar. And so if you're going to use the link from the calendar, again, you need to have Google Chrome as your default web browser. As I've said, it does work with others, but you have limited capability, so just don't do it. iPads, as I said earlier, treated by CVP as if they're a mobile phone. You can't share a screen at all. You can share one uploaded document from your device memory. It will then appear in a very tiny window, and you can't choose a page. You have to start at the beginning of the document and click through all the pages manually. Completely inadequate for a court hearing. So again, you're stuck with poorly performing iPads on CVP, so use a laptop on Google Chrome. When accessing CVP for the first time, again, as I addressed earlier, the need to practice, just ask the judge to direct a practice session before the actual hearing starts. You don't want to be sharing your screen or your bundle for the first time with a live witness in the middle of the hearing. Just have a practice beforehand. Judges should be dealing with this at case management stage. You need to plan ahead. So if you're using any video platform for hearing, whether it's Google Chrome, whether it's Safari, you need to grant the browser access to your microphone and camera. And in relation to screen sharing, you need to grant the browser permission to screen share. Again, these can all be done by going into your system preferences and granting those permissions. Now, if you want a guide to CBP, there are plenty of them on the gov.uk website. We also have one on the FLBA website, and indeed the ALC website. I'm sure the specialist bar associations have their own, so do take a look. And we are launching, I've been working with HMCTS on an interactive online training program. That's the one for the judiciary been launched a couple of days ago. There will be one out soon for practitioners, so do keep an eye out for it. I'm now going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to hand over to Matthew Richardson.
Thank you. So I'll just start my screen share now as well, so you can start from the right place, everybody. Darren, can you just confirm that you can see the main slide?
I can, just the main slide and you, and I'm going to
Great,
stop.
thank you.
Yeah, so you don't see me.
Okay, so I thought what I'd do is slightly go back to some of the fundamentals, because my experience of talking to practitioners recently has been that for quite a lot of us, the recent months have been an exercise as much in sort of survival through these changes as they have been anything else. And I thought it might be good to go back to the kind of foundations that sort of underpin a paperless setup, because I think once one understands the structure of a system and where the data is held, I think it helps to understand what you're doing when you're working in a paperless way. So the other thing as well, I would say, is that in my experience, most people understand that there is a hardware requirement and a software requirement attached to working in a paperless way, but there is a third fundamental that you need, which is a data handling setup, and that is to do with the way that you store, work with, and transmit data. It's really vitally important, and although it might seem quite scary, and in a way it's something that it's appropriate to be scared of it, to the extent that it's really important and you need to take it seriously, but there are simple ways of dealing with data storage that mean you won't run into problems. And so the starting point, and something that we've spoken to a lot of people about when we've been doing our training at FLBA, it's something that we've got at my chambers, and Darren, I know, has at his, is a secure cloud storage platform. And that has to be the starting point for where you keep your work data. Don't keep work data on a local basis. And by that, I mean, don't just keep your work files on your work computer or an external hard drive or a USB key without having it somewhere more centrally stored that's in a properly managed and properly secure environment, because it's just too much of a data risk. So things like Microsoft OneDrive, which is what we use at Coram, Dropbox for Business, I think Darren, they've got that over there at 1GC. These are the types of services that you should be looking to use, and they are vital. I would say that it's important to look for the business grade versions of these products, because they offer better levels of encryption and backup. So, you know, from the point of view of the sorts of work that we as lawyers are doing, it needs that highest level data security to go with it. And one of the things I remember being taught when I was studying many years ago was that if you can explain something using an analogy, then it shows that you've understood it as best you can. And so I tried to come up with a sort of analog analogy for data storage, and using the example of hard copy papers in chambers is a really good way of understanding the digital data storage. So the cloud, then the secure cloud, so your OneDrive or your Dropbox account, is the digital equivalent of the locked filing cabinet that you keep in chambers. So it's extremely secure because it's behind a series of locks, or obviously in the digital world, levels of encryption and password protection. And then the process of downloading files onto your device, so whether it's your laptop or your iPad or whatever, that process of downloading things from that cloud is the digital equivalent of photocopying the papers, putting them in your bag and taking them home. And I say photocopying rather than just taking them with you, because if you've got a proper cloud storage setup, then the files will never leave your cloud storage. You'll just always have duplicates of them synchronized onto your device, and we'll come on to synchronization again in a little bit. So yeah, so the process, for example, of putting your bundle on your iPad would be the equivalent of photocopying the bundle and taking it with you. Then doing the work on the papers, whether it's annotating them on your iPad, creating a document on your laptop or whatever, is the very straightforward digital equivalent of doing that work with those hard copy papers that you might do or that you might have done previously. And then the process of uploading data or synchronization is the equivalent of going back into Chambers and inserting all those new pages back into the bundle, or whatever other reorganization you would do, so that what you've gone home and done on your papers is then reflected in the sort of central storage space. And so that is the synchronization process that quite happily with many of these systems is automatic, so you don't need to worry about it too much if you set it up correctly in the first place. But one of the big messages here really, in terms of where you store data and how you use your digital devices, is that the work devices that you've got, so your laptop, your iPad, your desktop at home, your phone, they need to be understood as not as being data storage devices, because if you do that, if for example you just use your laptop and you keep all your work files on there, it is the equivalent of walking around with the entire contents of your secure cupboard or whatever at Chambers. And it means that if you were to lose or damage or have stolen your laptop, it's the equivalent of losing all of your papers for all of your cases. And that is not the sort of thing that you want to be doing. That's dicing with death from a data protection and getting fined by the ISO point of view. So coming back to some of the key principles then that emerge from this, first of all, it's absolutely vital that the master copy of all of your work data needs to be stored in the secure cloud platform that you're using. The sorts of platforms that you should be looking for, like Onedrive, should come with an off-site backup. And if they don't, you need to add one. So for example, what we've specified at Chambers is UK-based servers, and as standard, the business grade packages that we've given to all of our members ensure that you've got your main storage facility is somewhere, I think it's somewhere west of London, and then they've got another secure facility altogether somewhere else in the UK, and every file that you upload gets uploaded to one secure location and then copied across to another, so it's automatically backed up more than once. Don't store work data in different places across different devices. It's a recipe for disaster. And although it kind of might seem counterintuitive from a backup point of view, you should actually be looking to keep your work data in as few places as you possibly can. Really what you want is that the main place that all your data sits is the cloud. That is something that is backed up automatically. And then as and when you download the data onto devices, try and have it on as few devices as you can and make sure that those devices are backed up themselves. Because it's important to remember that the device is an endpoint. And if you talk to the sort of tech support people, this is the sort of language they might use. And what really that means is that it's the endpoint in a sequence of interacting with the data. And so it's sort of the sharp end, as it were. You know, you draw the data down from the cloud, interact with it with your endpoint, and then that change is synchronized back. So your laptop is not a storage point. That's what the cloud is for. And thinking about the possibility of loss, theft, or damage is quite a helpful way of understanding why you shouldn't just, for example, download a bundle directly from your email onto your iPad and just tootle off to court with it. Because if you lose that iPad or it gets stolen, you've not got it anywhere else. And it's worth remembering that data breaches are not confined to things getting stolen. If you lose a file such that nobody else has had access to it, but you can't recover it and you can't then transmit it back to a client, for example, that counts as a breach in a similar way to if you'd allowed the data to get stolen. So there is an extent to which this is all quite worrying, but like I said, try not to be overly pessimistic about it. And if you try and follow through with these key principles, you can keep yourself nice and safe. And so one of the things to remember with each of your endpoints, so your laptop, for example, is it's got to be properly protected by encryption and passwords. And nowadays, thankfully, most of the major operating systems have really folded encryption and password protection into the very sort of DNA of those systems. So you can go a long way to making sure that your device is properly protected just by keeping the operating system up to date. If at all possible, don't keep any work data on a device that can't be wiped remotely. So for example, with my phone, if I lose it, I can log on to another one of my devices, sort of basically access my phone and click delete. And then the next time my phone goes on the internet, the entire contents are wiped and it's completely locked. And then equally, again, with your devices, as I've already mentioned, it's really important to make sure that they're backed up in case you lose some of the changes that you've made before they've synchronized up to the cloud. And again, things like phones very frequently come with automatic backup systems and Apple devices as standard. So for example, my laptop that I'm working on now has a time machine facility that completely duplicates the system on a regular basis, which means that I could throw this laptop out of the window, buy a new one, plug it in and download the last time machine copy. And I'd have my entire system replicated over again. And there are Windows and similar equivalents out there. So understanding that your device is an endpoint and the cloud is a storage point, I think is a very helpful way of understanding what your devices are actually doing when you're working on your papers. So the synchronization process, I'm going to go into that a little bit more, is one of the best features of using a cloud, because what it means is that if you've got your devices properly connected into the cloud, you can pick up your phone or you can pick up your iPad, you can do some work on a document, and then if you're connected to the internet, those changes are automatically synchronized up to the cloud, and then you can pick up another device that's also connected into the cloud, and all of those changes and all of the new documents that you might have generated are available on that other device as well. So you've really got a complete sort of ecosystem, to use the jargon, that enables you to work paperlessly on whatever device you've got connected and wherever you want. And again, thinking in terms of an analogy or an example, actually, a lot of people, when I start talking to them about synchronization, sort of go a bit wide-eyed and start, sort of glazing over. And then I say, well, actually, almost everyone is familiar with this process because almost everybody has email synchronized to at least one of their devices. And structurally, the way in which your email works on your phone is exactly the same as what I'm talking about in terms of using the cloud to store your work files, because your email will be run by an external email service. They'll have their own offsite server farms that keep all the data and that process all the emails coming in and out. And all that you do is you connect your phone into that service. And so it downloads new emails when they come in and uploads them when you send them out. So really, that's the best example I can give of the way in which the device that you've got is an endpoint rather than a storage point, because you could lose your phone. It doesn't mean you lose all your emails. And so what you're really trying to do is come up with an equivalent data storage and management setup to that which you already have with your emails. And again, depending on which service you use, that might all be one and the same thing. So one of the reasons that we at Chambers picked the Microsoft system is because it does all of it in one go. So all of our members through Microsoft have the same login and password for their emails as they do for their cloud storage. And there's quite a lot of nice integration across things. But as Darren has already mentioned, I think Our view is that nowadays it shouldn't be something that's left up to people on an individual basis, because this is now the way of working in the modern world, such that if you're paying towards your chambers, or if you're employed, then this is a service that should be available to everyone in your organization, because it's something that everybody needs. It's just the basic way of doing business nowadays. So it's really, I think, cloud storage, etc., is the modern equivalent of the way in which Chambers provides photocopying and DX, although I think we've recently cancelled our DX subscription because we don't use it anymore. But I think it's really worth bearing in mind that you ought not to be alone with this. There is a lot of support out there from institutions like the Inns, but equally, the first thing that you should be doing if you're concerned about this, or if you really want to take it further, is your employer or your Chambers management. In terms of just some of the advice and specific tips that I can give that hopefully sort of emerge from thinking about the way that you're using your data. The first of which is really important is you need to be patient with the devices that you're using. It's worth remembering that actually, you know, let's say that you're downloading a massive bundle because you've got 1,000 pages of whatever, you know, types of exhibits. The process of, first of all, downloading that from the cloud onto your device will take a bit of time. And if you're interacting with a really big file like that, then the process of sending your changes back up to the cloud through the internet connection can sometimes take a little bit of time. And that is something that overlaps with what Darren talks about in terms of connectivity, which is that it's worth remembering that if you've got your synchronization set on to just always happen whenever you're connected to the internet, it's great most of the time because it's just seamless and you don't need to worry about it. But when you're thinking about things like maximizing your bandwidth for a hearing, if your computer's doing a lot of heavy lifting in terms of synchronizing changes up and down from the cloud through the internet connection at the same time as trying to connect you through to a hearing, that might affect your connection speed, and it might be worth therefore pausing your synchronization settings whilst you're connected to a hearing. Because the good thing about the synchronization, and again, it comes back to thinking about the example of emails, is that you don't need your internet connection to be on to be able to have access to your data. So long as you've connected to the internet, downloaded what you needed, and then the internet connection is cut for whatever reason. So for example, you're going through a train tunnel, you can still read your emails because they've downloaded locally onto your device. And so the exact same thing is true when it comes to using work files on your laptop or on your iPad during a hearing. So if you've downloaded everything before the hearing, turn the synchronization off, edit away, do whatever you want during the hearing with as little interruption as possible to your connection. And then when the hearing's over, turn the synchronization back on and your computer will upload all those changes. And so the most that you could possibly lose if you were to have some sort of tech problem would merely be the changes that you'd made during that hearing. And that's obviously relatively unlikely. In terms of whilst you're working with your documents on your device, I will also advise that you should keep clean copies of things. And again, this sort of comes back to the cupboard at Chambers example of what works very well is if upon receipt, let's say, of a bundle, you copy it. It's the first thing you do. Store the clean copy somewhere, and then only do your editing and annotation with the duplicated version. And what that means is that if you run into any problems with the files that you've been using, you've got a backup, and you don't have to connect back to whoever it was that sent it to you, or go back into your emails and dig through emails to find where it was sent. You've got a nice clean copy there available. And it also means that if you need to send a document on to somebody else, so for example, the judge says, oh, I actually don't have the chronology at the end of section A, please can you send it to me? You know, you're not stuck with simply your chronology that's covered in red pen saying, oh no, this is a lie and this is wrong, blah, blah, blah. You can just go into the original clean versions and send those on to the judge. Relatedly, in terms of keeping master copies of things, it's really important to think about the sort of sequences and workflows that you're using to interact with your data. And again, in terms of the training and things that we've been delivering at the FLBA level, one of the things I've been speaking to people about is thinking about having a system for what you do upon receipt of a file. And I thought I'd break mine down a little bit just to give you an example of what one would look like. So I get let's say I get a trial bundle from a solicitor on a new instruction. The first thing I will do digitally is I'll go into my OneDrive, create a folder for that case. So I've given, just in the square brackets there, a sort of basic explanation of where that folder might end up, and then save the bundle into that folder. I then immediately create a second folder within it called something like Master Copy Clean Originals, duplicate the bundle copy, the bundle file that I've just received, and then I put the original into that Clean Originals file. So it's always there. I never need to interact with it, and I know where to find it in due course. I sometimes stick, clean copy at the end of the file name, so I know that's what it is. And then I can set to work, dragging and dropping documents around, annotating stuff, et cetera, sort of creating my own bundles for my own use using the duplicated version. And that way, I've got the security of knowing that if anything ever does go wrong, or if I do need to send something to somebody else, I don't need to worry about sort of how that's going to work in terms of keeping my annotations to myself and sending a clean document to somebody else. So I'm just conscious of the time. It's just coming up to 10:02, and I think we'd agreed that we were going to spend the last 10 minutes or so dealing with questions. So I don't know, Lucinda, if there are any questions that have come through. Whether
yes, we have some questions
now.
In fact, Darren has just answered the questions while I was collating them. He's too efficient, but I will. I had a question myself, in fact, which was to do with when Darren was discussing the kind of the level of all the different devices he had. Do you think it used to be, obviously, that you used to be a Mac person, so you needed your kind of like MacBook, went with your kind of iPhone. Can you now mix and match, so you can have an iPhone and a Dell laptop, and which is running something different? Do you think it's better to have all the same system across all the devices?
Well, one of the questions I just answered was which PDF management software do we recommend? And when we were looking at this at 1GC last year, summer of last year, we decided to, as Chambers, to provide everybody with a business subscription to Adobe Acrobat Pro DC, because it works on every device. Doesn't work for particular reasons about iPads, again, just because the way they operate, but it works on a Mac in the same way as it works on a Windows device, and works equally well on a Surface tablet. So the software, iPads I think are different animals, and so you have to get really software specific programs for the iPad, and so I use PDF Expert on the iPad, but you can very much mix and match. I've just been an Apple person for a long time, and so I can't remember the last time I turned on a Windows device. But some people are very, very much wedded to their Windows devices, and so it's all it all interacts well together now these days.
Yeah, I'd say you don't necessarily need to have compatible physical devices all from the same brand, as it were, because what someone like Apple does is they create an environment of Apple products and Apple software that all works together. Whereas what we're talking about here is not quite the same thing. So for example, OneDrive is that's a Microsoft environment that's just to do with digital. It's and so if you've got a device that can run the Microsoft 365 software, then it doesn't matter. You've got the compatibility comes from the device's ability to run the Microsoft programs rather than from who built the device. So you could easily have a Microsoft Surface laptop and an iPad, and then a Dell desktop, and they'd all work perfectly fine.
And we've had some questions while you've been answering that. So Chris Mallett would like Darren to explain again where his WhatsApp is located. He wants to know, is it on your iPhone or your iPad, so your third or your fourth device?
No, it's on my phone. So I don't want to get confused. So my client communication is on my phone, and I literally just open WhatsApp and press the video icon and open a video conversation with everyone in my team, completely separately to what's going on with my other 3 devices that I'm using to manage the hearing. So I just use my mobile telephone.
It is worth saying though that with WhatsApp, at least on Apple, I don't know about Microsoft, but you can get a desktop app for WhatsApp. So I have my WhatsApp chats with my solicitors on my laptop screen because I've got the partner app from WhatsApp.
And then there's a question about exporting all bookmarks in a PDF bundle from Adobe Acrobat Pro, where you've just bookmarked and labeled them, to a Word file so that you can create an index from them. Is there any way of doing that?
Yeah, there is. By bookmarks, I'm interpreting that as your annotations, your markings on the bundle. Absolutely. You can create comment files, and you can export all of it. And indeed make different schedules from comments that are marked with different colours. And if you want to learn how to do that, then go to our FLBA training, because we explain it.
Yeah. It's worth remembering you can export the comments if you've typed them in onto the document. Yep. If you've used a pen or a stylus and scribbled them on, it won't export those into Word for perhaps obvious reasons.
So that, in fact, there's one of the other questions. Do you type or do you prefer to handwrite your annotations onto PDF Pro Adobe Expert?
I think it depends what you're doing. I know Darren does a particular thing that's really handy with his annotations.
I type all of mine so that I can then search my annotations as well. So I will use little speech bubbles. I will type in, and I set mine so I can cut, and when I highlight any text, it automatically creates a comment box, and then I can annotate. I can effectively provide an annotation on the extracts that I've put in the comment box. So yeah, typing, because then you're saving time because you can search it.
Whereas what I do, and I think it's for a different purpose, is that because I frequently use thumbnail view, because I've got quite good eyesight and a very big screen, so I can view sort of 30 pages at once on my screen, but all quite small, is I'll get my stylus and write massive annotations on them in huge bright colors, so that when I'm looking at 30 pages at once, I can see really easily, particular things in, with the particular color codes, or I'll do particular little annotations so I can sort of follow the same shape and track things in that way. The good thing about the whole thing is that there's so much flexibility in the products, and it's only getting better and better as the years go by.
The person has clarified on the bookmarks, they actually meant bookmarks, not comments.
No, then I don't think there is, because the bookmark is how you are actually constructing the bundle. I'm not aware of how you would convert that construction into a Word document. It might be possible, but I just don't know.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we sort of touch on in the FLBA training video, is that you kind of have to spend some time playing around with the functionality and thinking about what you want to do, and sort of bodge some of the solutions that you want. So it might be that if you're using the bookmark function, but you can't use it for exporting, you might want to switch away from bookmarks and use something else instead, so that you get that bit of overlap. But in a way, it sort of comes back to the value of creating a master copy that's nice and clean, and then duplicating it so you can faff around with the new one. And if it all goes a bit wrong, you haven't ruined everything.
And then there's a question in relation to, I'm going to ask about out of turn, because then there's two which are essentially the same question, but what software do you recommend for OCRing documents?
Adobe.
Yeah, Adobe. It's all. Adobe is, one of our colleagues on our training panel previously called it the granddaddy of PDF management software, and it has a OCR function, and you can just convert all of your pages into digitally readable files, and it's a quick and simple process.
Yeah, I personally, I think the Adobe interface for 90% of my annotations work is a bit clunky and intrusive, but in terms of the power of it as a piece of software, it's unrivaled. So I know quite a few people keep Adobe mainly just to do OCR, and then they'll have something else to do the sort of front end annotation. So I use PDF Expert because I think it's really good. And so, yeah, but Adobe is just the best OCR software that's out there at the moment.
And then several questions all kind of touching on the same theme about storage. Is Google Drive for Business just as acceptable as Microsoft OneDrive?
I can't reliably give you advice about that because as a Chambers, we went for OneDrive. We received third-party advice about it, which I double-checked. So I know that OneDrive is GDPR compliant. I'm assuming that Dropbox for Business is, because I know that Darren's Chambers is equally well run as mine, but I don't have personal experience of Google, so I'm not sure. The thing that's worth checking with something like Google, with it being a very big American-based company, is where their servers are. So my guess would be that unless you're going to be able to specify, they're probably going to have some US-based servers, in which case you might be on a bit of a sticky wicket there.
I think then the question, the other kind of wrap-up questions with those are, I think you've probably answered it in that, is this GDPR compliant, and do we have to be careful where our data is stored, which I think you've just essentially said we do need to be very careful about where the server is for where it's being stored. And then someone else has asked, is there a risk of documents being hacked if they're being stored in the cloud?
Well, yes, to the extent that you can come up with a risk of basically anything. But if one sort of actually looks at the sort of data breaches that happen and starts paying attention to it, which I have been since I've been in charge of IT at Chambers, it's the sort of thing I notice out in the world now. And by and large, and I know this because I've got friends and relatives who work in data security, hard copy paper is less secure than digital if you do digital correctly. The number of times I've been able to read people's papers over their shoulders on trains, or they've just left, documents lying around at court, that they are more serious data breaches than most people realize. And actually, if you've got your data in something like OneDrive, and you're following best practice with your devices, the chances of a hack are quite low. But also, importantly, if you followed best practice, then it's probably not your fault if there's been a hack. You've done everything you reasonably could to protect against it. And so the ICO isn't going to come after you. They're going to go after, whoever else's responsibility it is. But if you follow best practice from a data security point of view, this is more data secure than how it used to be. I mean, just think about the sort of stereotypical old-fashioned chambers where you can just walk around the building and there are just papers everywhere, and the cleaning staff that come in, have they signed data security waivers? Have they had suitable background checks? All the other staff that go around the building, external contractors, third parties like clients and solicitors, with hard copy documents lying around, it's much less secure than using proper cloud-based storage solutions.
And then there's just a question can you imagine the court files and say the county court being fully digitized, i.e. entirely paperless?
They are. Some of them are already. My understanding is, like public law children cases, they're all fully digital files now. And indeed, you're issuing applications in central hubs that's then being transmitted electronically out to hearing centres. So absolutely.
The thing is, we know it's possible because if you go to certain jurisdictions, within England and Wales, it's been being done for ages. I mean, I remember when I was very, very junior being told about some of the commercial courts in London only accepting documents on disk. And you had to go and deliver the disk to court, and they'd load it up onto their system, and then there'd be screens all around the court. So it's possible, but how much of it I can imagine actually rolling out is very closely related to the way in which the court service is run at the moment, on less than a shoestring. And so the sort of lack of joined up thinking that we're seeing at the moment, when it comes to implementing digital reform, is really worrying. Why are they using CVP, for example? when there were, in my view, and I think Darren agrees with me, better options that were readily available.
Well, then I think that has answered all the questions that the kind of participants have posted, and we're exactly on 6 o'clock. So it just falls to me to thank you both very much for giving an extremely comprehensive review of essentially what every barrister needs to know. If they didn't already know it, they really have to know this. I am firstly going to go away and do my speed check because I have no idea what my speed is, and I like the idea of a backdrop. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to get on my kind of screen backdrop. I mean, it probably should be white, but there's, you know, there's ability for kind of marketing of chambers and all that kind of stuff to be on the back of it. And I'll look out for the CVP training when it comes, because I practice in a court that doesn't have it yet. And I think obviously it'll be a massive advantage if I know how to use it before everyone else. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.